It's time for a heart-to-heart, because I haven't been entirely honest with you. I haven't been entirely honest with myself. Hello, swolemates, welcome back, and dog bless you. This is another video about manhood. Kind of. Some of it is me getting some things off my chest, because I know that despite our community here being small by internet standards, I still have a bit of a reputation as a guy who is honest and in touch with his feelings, which I appreciate. Some have told me that this is a feminine trait, but we'll get to that, because others have told me that this approach just isn't relatable to men, that the left is failing men, and I would like to discuss why I think that is. First, I want to talk about two men that many of you probably know about, our boy Sneako, and the offensive who we will simply be referring to as Marcus for the rest of this discussion. Recently, a video of Sneako meeting some of his incredibly young fans surfaced, and I'm just gonna go ahead and play it for you because I'm sure many of you have already seen it. It's everywhere.
What'd you say? Woman, the woman.
What? No, wait. We love women. We love women.
But not like transgenders.
Yes, sir. We love everybody.
Okay.
No.
All gays
Yeah,
yeah, merch, preach.
What have I done?
Couple of things I want to point out here is how desperate this little dude is for acknowledgement, the way he keeps putting his hand up for contact, the way he keeps running through what he thinks he's supposed to say.
We love women.
But not like transgenders.
And how all of these boys are emulating Sneako's on-stream behavior. What we see from Sneako is a man being confronted by the consequences of his own actions.
What have I done?
Noah Samson, FD Signifier, and Ro Ramden already made videos about this, so I'm not going to get too into the specifics of Sneako himself and what led him to this grift, but that's what it is. That's what is happening here. Pandering to bigotry for the sake of engagement, because it works. That's what the algorithm likes. It's the same reason why guys like Walsh, Shapiro, and Peterson have been able to continue their hateful rhetoric largely unchecked, certainly on YouTube. This hate is the reason for their success. Walsh has admitted this in emails, and prior to publicly attacking trans people, Peterson didn't really mean fuck all to anyone except for a few U of T students who were probably really happy to have a professor who made Psych 101 a little bit more interesting.
The rap goes like this.
Credit where it's due. Enter Marcus, who has taken a Blair White approach to visibility by being a trans person who openly hates trans people. The grift here is just looking for clips of trans people being inflammatory and then putting them under a magnifying glass. Now, the obvious thing here is that some trans people are shitty, because trans people are people, and some people are violent, destructive, or dangerous. There are complicated reasons for this in pretty much every case, but that is a conversation for another day. Today, I would like to point out that most often the people being highlighted by the aforementioned hate peddlers are only guilty of one thing: challenging the status quo, either explicitly by calling for change, or simply by not existing within its standards. This is one of two reasons why it's so easy for these people to accumulate followings. We love the freaks, specifically feeling like we're superior to them. We love the disaster, we love the discomfort. It's the same reason why so many people out there slow down while they're going past a car accident. Oh, look at that, what a mess, glad it's not me. It affirms your understanding of yourself as normal, someone who fits in. Or maybe you're one of those people who tries to justify it by spit-shining your morbid curiosity until it has a compassionate sparkle. Oh, those poor people. I'm just watching to better understand. And maybe you are. I don't know. But whether you like it or not, you are part of the machine when you do that. The second reason for the success of hatred on these platforms is something we have discussed before: the power of validation. How good it feels when someone tells us that we don't need to change, we don't need to work on ourselves, that we feel the way we feel about the world because we're right, that the discomfort we're experiencing is because of how many people out there are wrong. That's all it is. Not because we are not understanding something. And I know that because I used to feel that way. I used to think that an underlying theme of dissatisfaction with existence in general was normal. That the things people told me that validated my preconceived notions of the world felt good because they were right, not because they made me feel like I was right. And obviously, this was more comfortable than confronting the possibility of being wrong, of having been misled by the norm my entire life up until that point. That when I stepped away from engagements with people who were challenging me, my persistent discomfort was because the world is kind of shit, not because I was being kind of shit within it. It is so easy to capitalize on misogyny, racism, homophobia, transphobia, because these are things that people already believe to some extent. Even if, perhaps especially if, They don't admit it to themselves. Again, you have to identify a problem before you can fix it. A great many people would rather lick validation off the walls of their ignorance cave than face the discomfort of adjusting to the light outside, light that would undoubtedly reveal things about themselves that they are just not ready to see. I usually make a point of not highlighting specific individuals if I can avoid it, not because I think some people don't deserve the critical attention, but because I recognize that it's simply feeding the pattern that let them achieve influence in the first place. But fuck it. Sometimes you gotta play the game to demonstrate why the game kinda sucks. These hate grifters didn't just get lucky. The algorithm didn't push them because it chooses what we should care about. It simply responds to what works. I recognize that at any point I could turn my channel into a massive financial success by playing to the hate market and supplying a steady stream of validation. But alas, I genuinely care about people, even the ones who are hurting me. And unfortunately, this means that my approach will simply not reach the young men that the left is apparently failing. These guys have been set up to fail from the start by the very systems that leftists are critiquing, and they stop listening to us the moment they realize that we are challenging what they have been taught is true. The reason young boys latch on to guys like Sneako and Andrew Tate isn't because better alternatives aren't available to them. It's because they have already been taught an archetype of manhood that is dependent on hatred and subjugation. Any man who doesn't operate from a place of explicit misogyny and queerphobia, then, must not be a man. They believe masculinity is violence. When I think about what it means to be a man, I think about my favorite fictional characters in media. Dick Grayson, Miles Morales, Clark Kent, Christopher Pike, Uncle Iroh. Characters who represent perseverance, leadership, patience, self-knowing, kindness, and strength. I think about my dad and my grandpa, two men who modeled all of the aforementioned traits throughout my life. When I'm accused of not understanding men, of not reaching men, it erases the fact that I am a man, that I learned my understanding of manhood from other men, that men have contacted me to tell me they relate to my experience because we are a diverse group of people. This is also what being a man looks like. What is being requested in the left is failing men discussion is that the guys who follow the Superman philosophy start speaking Joker. That all the Christopher Pikes out there try harder to be Rick Sanchez. There's a very weird sense of entitlement weaved through this thinking. It demands that you validate violence and hatred before you can expect the opportunity to be heard about peace and love. To me, this is just another way that this parasitic and destructive construct of manhood perpetuates itself. And I know I'm gonna get complaints that I'm still not getting it, so tell me, talk to me about it. Because I keep offering to listen, and just about every time one of these guys has gotten any further than you don't get it, it just goes back to complaining about women. And I just gotta be real with you, bud. I'm not gonna handhold your misogyny so that you feel validated enough to listen while I tell you to love yourself and be kind. That is asinine. The reason so many people think that leftists aren't trying to reach men is because most of us aren't indulging these systems of hatred through which these guys have been taught to connect. Sneako is not teaching young boys hatred. He is relying on its presence. He is a litmus test for systemic misogyny, and if you have ever rolled your eyes at discussions of structural discrimination, you need to pay closer attention, because this is a clear example of it. Guys like Sneako would get nowhere if they weren't playing off beliefs that already exist. These kids learn prejudice from an extremely young age. And in this instance, they have learned that it is synonymous with being a man. My preference for calm, compassionate conversation is something that some people, usually men, have told me is a feminine trait. Sometimes they say it as a compliment, but regardless, I take it as one. I don't think it's a bad thing to be feminine. But there's nothing remotely feminine about my approach. I'm just not catering to an archetype of manhood that is utterly devoid of self-awareness, self-control, and built on performing hatred. I am a man. A masculine one at that, because those are the values that I enjoy, that is the lens through which I see the world, and that is the archetype that I have been taught. Also, much to Matthew's dismay, I'm sure I can catch a fish and throw a spear. When my behavior and my approach is read as feminine, it is largely because many people have a twisted idea of masculinity as something that is domineering, violent, and misogynistic. But I see dominance as less about controlling others and more one's own resistance to being controlled. Now, I'm not going to get too theoretical here. I'm not going to talk about the ways that masculinity and femininity are completely arbitrary, the way they differ across cultures and time periods. We can talk about that another time. Instead, I am going to make a confession. One that a lot of you caught in my last video that is very much apparent here right now. And that is that I am angry, and I often operate from that place. My compassion is informed by my anger in a great many ways. This is not to say I'm not sensitive, because I am, or that I'm denying being soft, because I'm not. I'm proud of those things about myself, And I am many things, as we all are. But I am angry. I look at the state of the world, and I'm f***ing pissed. But my anger motivates me. It is my inner advocate, it is my drive, and I have learned to channel it into pursuits that are constructive, things that matter, lest it consume me from the inside. I know a lot of boys and men out there are also angry. I know that they have learned that anger is the quintessential masculine trait, that they should express it, and that it is always someone else's fault, or at the very least, somebody else's responsibility to fix. What seems unmasculine about me is that I am choosing to take responsibility for my anger and create something better with it. That I'm operating internally rather than externally, and not playing to boys will be boys by contributing to an environment that is pissing away male potential and strength. An environment that creates a lazy, pathetic pattern of telling guys that it is okay, desirable even, to be a hateful piece of shit who makes the world harder for everybody else. Guys, how are you not insulted by that? How are you not pissed off by the fact that people rely on you being so inept at self-awareness that you just keep coming back to trade your dignity for crumbs of validation that barely sustain you and sure as shit don't make you happy? Countless people out there are so secure in your inability to challenge and question yourself that they have made a living off of it, and a good one. You are angry about isolation and loneliness, angry about the lack of support, angry about spending so much time preparing for a world that doesn't exist anymore, and again, I know this because so many of you have told me. And instead of doing something about this, instead of recognizing that we deserve better and pushing for a world that reflects that, you're just going to blame women and queer people. Because that is what you have been told to do. And God forbid you think for yourselves. How it doesn't piss you off that you've been that easily manipulated is beyond me. And the fact that you are so threatened by people who are pushing for a better world speaks volumes in itself. That is not what it means to be a man. That is being a grunt-level reinforcer of the very system that is oppressing you, a system you could challenge with your anger, but are choosing not to. I have been missing in action recently for life reasons. My patrons know more, but my creative burnout was brought on by the discouraging nature of this platform. That people like Sneako, like Marcus, choose to cater to the anger and ignorance in their audience, and it works. It works because they are relying on you to not be better, to be your broken concept of a man. Someone who lacks the ability to examine your feelings, your drive, and the good that you could accomplish with it. What I am trying to do here on this channel, what I am trying to encourage other people to do, is operate from the masculine traits of stoicism, real stoicism, and using your strength to build something better. If this does not appeal to you, fine. It's a shame, but part of my goal here is helping more men think for themselves. But you are not the arbiters of what is and is not helpful to boys and men just because something is not helpful to you personally. And I think that the influencers out there who are reinforcing this whole left is failing men bullshit really need to recognize that they are catering to a very specific demographic when they say that. I am just one voice of many that will work for some people and not for others. I can reach the people who want to be reached, but I am not compromising my moral code to lick the cave walls with those who don't. Do not confuse my compassion with passivity. Do not confuse my patience with not getting it. I get it, but I live in a world that views me as a monster simply for existing, a world full of people who are actively trying to take away my rights and my safety. I recognize how quickly my anger would be weaponized against me if I do not hone it very carefully. I have been discouraged recently. Discouraged by the fact that the approach that I take, that I have learned from truly brilliant people, requires hours of reading and research and exhausting efforts of communication, while people who are spreading conflict only need to turn on a camera and say the most horrible shit that comes to mind, because they are relying on you to consume it without asking questions. It all boils down to the underlying assumption that you are a fool who exists to be exploited, and you keep proving them right. But I'm still here, and I'm still angry, so I'm not done yet. And I can't imagine I will be anytime soon. Which means I'll see you next time. And as always, thanks for watching. So I guess we're doing credit scenes now, mostly to use this opportunity to offer some caveats and address the elephant in the room. Now the big one here is that obviously this is not a video to send to boys. I understand that the content that I'm making requires a certain level of pre-existing understanding about sociology and social issues. I get that. People talk to me like I'm not aware of that. I am. You need to take more time to consider who I am trying to reach, because I have taken a lot of time to consider who I am trying to reach. And thankfully, I've had a lot of great feedback. I've had a lot of really, really, really wonderful people reach out and share things with me, and it means the world. If any of you are watching right now, thank you so much for doing that. But here's the thing that I need these people who are pushing this whole left not helping men rhetoric to understand. What do you mean by the left? And which men? Who are you talking about? I understand that I am speaking to the demographic that is reachable in the approach that I take, and I'm fine with that. It's not something that I'm not aware of. Credits are probably done, so I'm just going to leave it here.